Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Today we are building Kefka Last Laugh, but I assure you, you are going to be the only one that is laughing whenever you build this deck because this guy is incredibly powerful and salt-inducing at the same time. Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, he's going to force everybody to discard a card, and then you get to draw a card for the amount of card types discarded this way. In no scenario do you not at least get 2 cards off of this ability, but then we have a problem, right? And I say problem with an asterisk because your problem is eventually your opponents aren't going to have any cards left in their hand. But don't worry, we solved that problem by putting an activated ability on this guy for 8 mana. We can flip him, and then we're going to get to draw a card for each life our opponents lose, which is absolutely insane. It's not absurd and crazy to picture a scenario where we're triggering this guy upwards to 6 times a turn, especially with this brew. So buckle up and let's get right into it. After you guys click on that whatnot link and claim your free $15, additionally, you guys can get 10% off all of your Tolarian library proxies whenever you use code DT4D. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. As a thank you, because I know it's annoying, I will be trying to respond to every single comment in the comment section down below. Now, let's get on with the deck tech. The first thing we're going to try to do is strip away our opponent's hands with as many ETB triggers as possible. Roaming Throne, Duban, and Harmonic Prodigy are not only going to double up on the ETBs, but Harmonic Prodigy and Roaming Throne are also going to double up on his attack trigger, because Roaming Throne allows you to choose a creature whenever it enters the battlefield, and if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. Harmonic Prodigy says something very similar. If an ability of a shaman or another wizard you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. And then Doben says if a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So now we're getting double ETB triggers, double attack triggers, causing our opponents to discard 2 cards in 1 turn. And that's at minimum. Again, it's not impossible to get 6 triggers of Kefka per turn with this insane deck. Quantum Misalignment and Vile Duplication are going to be perfect here. These are going to net us non-legendary copies of our commander. That means whenever we clone him, they're actually going to stick onto the battlefield. Sakashima and Spark Double do something very similar, but what's cool about Sakashima and Spark Double is you can actually blink them. So now we can blink a non-legendary copy of our commander as well and create token copies of our non-legendary commander. Very useful here because the more commanders we have on the battlefield, the more cards we are forcing our opponents to discard. Saw in Half is absolutely insane. What you do is you attack with Kefka, that's 1 trigger, and then you can saw him in half, netting 2 additional triggers, so 3 triggers overall. Your opponents are discarding 3 cards this way, and then whenever you tack on Roaming Throne or Harmonic Prodigy, you're going to get 6 triggers of Kefka instead. Absolutely insane, especially when you take into account if we do this with Spark Double or Sakashima, we actually get to keep those because we don't have to axe them to the legendary rule. Twin Flame, Molten Duplication, and Electro Duplicate are all cards that are going to allow us to create a token copy of Kefka. Notably, we don't care if we have to discard these to the legendary rule or not, but if we don't, that does give us a hasty token copy of our commander, so we not only get the ETB, but we get the attack trigger as well. Assuming we have our original commander, that means we get 2 Kefka attack triggers and 1 Kefka ETB for a total of 3 triggers in 1 turn. But in all reality, now that I'm thinking about it, this means we also have to have Sakashima or Spark Double on the battlefield, so we're probably getting closer to 4 because these have to be non-legendary tokens, right? Phantasmal Image is also solid here. This guy's 2 CMC and comes in as a copy of our commander. Notably, this one does kind of suck because we can't blink it, but I did want to mention something with all of these clone effects. If you have something like a Harmonic Prodigy already on the battlefield, you can actually clone the Harmonic Prodigy instead of Kefka, and you're kind of getting the same amount of value, right? Because you're doubling it up even more. Delina Wild Mage allows you to roll a d20 whenever she attacks, and you get to create a tapped in attacking token that's a copy of a creature except it's not legendary and has exile this creature at the end of combat. Really solid here. We get the ETB and we get to deal a little bit more damage. Not to mention, if you roll a 15 or 20, you get to repeat the process, so you can keep getting more and more of these Kefka ETBs. Displacer Kitten is absolutely insane. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. This means for every non-creature spell we're casting, we're actually going to go ahead and get another Kefka ETB. And in the late game, Displacer Kitten is still super useful because what we're going to need is mana. So now whenever we have flipped Kefka and we're drawing cards whenever we're casting non-creature spells due to our wizard abilities, we're also going to be able to blink our artifacts to tap them for more mana, allowing us to cast more spells, and then we draw more cards. So it enables us in the late game and in the early game, so we love it here. Cursed Mirror is also super solid. Not only is it a mana rock, but also as it enters the battlefield, we can have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. So again, non-legendary Kefka, we love it. Harmonic Prodigy, we love it if we don't want to sacrifice it to the legend rule. And honestly, we really don't care about getting a Kefka trigger for 3 mana. I mean, this trigger's super efficient. You're making your opponents go down a card each, and you get to go up cards. So all of our clones are card advantage. Let's be honest, you would just straight up play a 2 CMC spell that has Kefka's ETB on it, just because it's that good. Essence Flux, Planar Incision, and Siren's Ruse allow us to blink our commander. Notably, since these are instants, you can wait until one of our opponents tries to remove our commander because they're going to be gunning for him, and then blink them in response. Now, their removal spell will fizzle, and we get a Kefka ETB for them to discard a card. It's going to feel super bad for them. Let's talk about some of those cards that enable us to easily flip our commander. Descent into Avernus seems pretty good because our opponents aren't going to have any cards to cast, so giving them a ton of treasure tokens seems like a no-brainer, right? So for 3 mana, we get an enchantment that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we get to put 2 counters on Descent into Avernus, then each player creates X treasure tokens, and Descent into Avernus deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. So not only does it speed up the game by getting rid of our opponent's life totals, our opponents don't have any cards to cast because we've ripped them from their hand, and then we get all the mana in the world to flip Kefka and start drawing a ton of cards. The Reaver Cleaver seems super solid. Not only is he 4 power, but if we flip him, he has flying and he has 5 power, 6 power with the Reaver Cleaver equipped, so it's not hard to connect, generate 5 treasure tokens, flip them, and then boom, we're off to the races and drawing a ton of cards. Mana Geyser just adds 1 red mana for each tap land your opponents control. Notably, this is 5 mana. You do have to use this at the right time though, because eventually your opponents are going to stop tapping their lands because they don't have any cards to cast. Neheb the Eternal, super solid here. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you get to add 1 red for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So we're going to deal a lot of ping damage to our opponents. We're going to talk about that strategy a little bit later. So when we're pairing the ping damage with Neheb, we're going to easily hit 8 mana and flip Kefka. Rankle seems pretty funny here. For 4 CMC, you get a legendary creature fairy rogue that has flying and haste, and whenever Rankle, Master of Pranks, deals combat damage to a player, choose any number. Each player discards a card, each player loses 1 life and draws a card, and each player sacrifices a creature. So not only will this get rid of their creatures if they have any left, we can actually make them draw cards, so we can blink Kefka and make them discard them for more card advantage ourselves, and we can even force them to discard more cards if we just want to take away their hand faster. Waste Not is also super powerful in this strategy. For 2 CMC, you get an enchantment that says whenever opponent discards a creature card, you get to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, add 2 black to your mana pool, and whenever an opponent discards a non-creature non-land card, you get to draw a card. This can notably easily flip our commander, especially if we're blinking him over and over again. We get to keep all that black mana because they don't discard it in the combat phase, and then we can use all that black mana to easily flip Kefka after they have no hand. Monument of Endurance. For 3 CMC, you get an artifact that says whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You can draw a card, create a treasure token, or each opponent loses 3 life. I like Invasion of Amonkhet here. It says whenever Invasion of Amonkhet enters the battlefield, each player mills 3 cards, then each opponent discards a card, and you draw a card. So we're getting card advantage, we're doing the Kefka thing, and then whenever we flip this invasion, we get a creature that says you may have Lazotop convert into the battlefield as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard, except it's a 4/4 black zombie in addition to its other types. So we kind of get reanimation while doing the Kefka thing. It just seemed too perfect, especially since Kefka does have 4 power, so it can instantly flip this over whenever we cast it. Dothi Voidwalker is also especially messed up here. He's 2 CMC, has Shadow, and says if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. Then we can sacrifice this creature, choose an exiled card an opponent owns with a void counter on it, and we can play it this turn without paying its mana cost. Super busted. Vivi not only fits with the wizard theme, but additionally it pairs amazingly with his flip side that allows us to draw a card whenever our opponents lose life. Vivi is a 3 CMC legendary creature wizard that has 0, add X mana in any combinations of blue or red where X is Vivi or an enters power, activate only during your turn and only once each turn. So we get mana because we get the ability whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Vivi or Neater and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So not only do we get the mana, we also get the ability to draw a ton of cards whenever we flip our commander, since he's kind of like essentially a curiosity effect. Black Waltz, number 3, for 4 CMC, you get a legendary creature wizard that says Flying Death Touch. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Black Waltz number 3 deals 2 damage to each opponent. So that means for each non-creature spell, whenever our commander is flipped, we're drawing 6 cards. Kuja Genome Sorcerer is also going to be super solid here. This is a 4 CMC legendary creature human mutant wizard that says, at the beginning of your end step, create a tapped 0/1 black wizard creature token with, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. Then, if you control 4 or more wizards, transform Kuja. And then he turns into a 4/6 avatar wizard that says, if a wizard you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. Notably, remember, our commander has 5 power, this guy has 4 power, so at a minimum, we're drawing 18 cards, which is kind of insane. And then you add in all of the black wizards that are dealing 1 damage whenever we cast a non-creature spell that are now dealing 2 damage, so the card advantage is going to get insane, and we're going to just find the pieces we need to win the game. Ruthless Technomancer is a 4 CMC human wizard that says, when Ruthless Technomancer enters, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to that creature's power. And then additionally, for 3 mana, we can sacrifice X artifacts and return target creature with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X can't be 0. So we get some reanimation, this guy's a wizard, and we get a way to generate a ton of treasure tokens. Notably, if we draw too many cards, we probably need to sacrifice our commander so we don't deck ourselves. Raise the Palisade is a kindred removal spell that says, choose a creature type, return all creatures that aren't of the chosen type to their owner's hands. I like that it returns them to their hands also, because now we can just start discarding them with our commander again. So boom, now you don't have to worry about their board state because their board state is in their graveyard. Esper of the Magicite. 4 CMC instant that says, exile each opponent's graveyard. When you do, choose up to 1 target creature card exiled this way. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's an artifact in addition to all its other types. So now we just get to reanimate all of the broken creatures we just forced our opponents to discard. Will of the Jeskai might seem weird, but let me explain. You get a 4 CMC sorcery that says, choose 1. If you control your commander as you cast this spell, you may choose both instead. Each player may discard their hand and then draw 5 cards. All of your opponents are going to choose that because they probably have no hand. And then the next one says, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. This is where we don't care, right? So in a scenario where we let all of our opponents draw their entire hand back because they have no hand, we also get to draw more cards, and every instant and sorcery card in our graveyard gains flashback. Well, guess what's in our graveyard? All of our instant blink spells, all of our instant create a token copy effects. So we're just going to be able to blink our commander a ton, create more token copies of him, and take away that hand that they just drew. Echoes of Aeon seems like a perfect shuffler effect in this deck as well, since we can discard it and then use its flashback cost for only 3 CMC, and then each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards. Generator Servant, also one of the best cards. Busy put me onto this card and it's put in some insane work. For 2 CMC, you get a creature elemental that says, sacrifice Generator Servant, add 2 mana to your mana pool. If that mana is spent to cast a creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. So not only do you get to cast Kefka, but additionally, Kefka gains haste. So you get 2 Kefka triggers the turn you cast him. And since this guy comes down turn 2, the latest you're casting your commander is turn 3. So turn 3, you're forcing your opponents to discard 2 cards. It's not okay. Hullbreaker Horror and Massacre Worm are the big bads of the deck. Massacre Worm is super fun to blink, clone, do all that stuff because you're dealing a ton of damage to your opponents while you're also making them sacrifice their entire board. Notably, if Kefka is flipped, we're drawing a ton of cards during this as well. Hullbreaker Horror has a ton of combo potential, but I don't think I put anything in the deck directly to combo with him. He's just a super powerful card here that's going to allow us to not only return our mana rocks back to our hand, but recast them, triggering all our wizard effects. Additionally, it's just super powerful to bounce all of our opponent's problem pieces while being able to put cards that they're trying to cast right back into your hand. And at the end of the day, we are running a little bit of a reanimator strategy since we are discarding cards. So we're discarding massive creatures, we reanimate them, and we take control of the board that way also. Anger and Wonder seem like no-brainers. You want these in your graveyard. Anger is going to give all of your creatures haste. Wonder is going to give all of your creatures flying. Spellskite's going to protect our commander. We can change the target of any spell by paying 1 blue Phyrexian. Also, I take that back about Hullbreaker Horror. We are on Soul Ring and Signets, and then we also play Vivi. So all we have to do here is generate an infinite amount of casts with Soul Rings and our Signets, and then Vivi is going to get an infinite amount of counters and do an infinite amount of damage. So that's also going to go ahead and end the game, but those are 3 very specific pieces. Kind of easy to get to because our commander draws us a ton of cards, but it is just a solid way to win the game whenever you get there. And you can also use Hullbreaker Horror to bounce all of your draw effects back to your hand. That way you don't deck yourself, which is also weirdly important here.